So you come from Canada or another high-tax country, and you want to switch to a friendly tax residence in the Caribbean. What are some of the options out there? Well, some of the most notable ones are the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas. But how do they compare? That's what we're going to talk about today. We will put them side by side so that you ultimately can decide which one is the best fit for you. Hi, my name is Natalia and I am a Research and Development Associate at Nomad Capitalist. We often help our clients get residence in tax-friendly places. And some of the best options out there are located in the Caribbean. You may have heard about the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands, and there are many different ways in which you can obtain residence there. But today, I want to talk to you about how to get a permanent residence by making an investment in each of these countries. You will find that there are a lot of differences between the two, and ultimately it comes down to what your priorities are in order to pick one or the other. Let's leave the tax aside for a moment and talk about what is it that you need in order to get a residence permit and immigration status in each of these islands. And let's start out with the basics. So a permanent residence basically means an indefinite residence that never expires. There's always caveats to this, but basically, in the Bahamas, you need to make an investment of $1 million and you need to make sure to spend at least 90 days per year in the country. Otherwise, even if your residence is permanent, it may be revoked. On the other hand, the Cayman Islands can also give you a permanent residence by investment, but at a much higher fee of $2.4 million. The perk is that you only need to visit at least 1 day per year. But what can you actually invest in for each of these countries? Well, let's start out with the Bahamas. In the Bahamas, this $1 million investment must go towards either developed real estate or zero-coupon bonds. In both cases, the investment must be held for at least 10 years, after which, if you want, you can sell it and you can still keep your permanent residence so long as you continue meeting the physical presence requirements. But what are zero-coupon bonds? Well, actually, this is a new initiative put out by the government of the Bahamas, and they are bonds that are issued by the central bank, and they do not pay you interest. Instead, you buy them at a lower value, and after the maturity period of 10 years, you get the full $1 million paid back to you. However, even though this law came into effect on January 1st, we still don't have a set date into when these bonds will start to circulate. So for now, we only have really the real estate option. For the real estate option, there's actually quite some flexibility when you compare it to other Caribbean islands. And this is because the property does not necessarily need to be bought from a developer. So if, for example, you want to buy the property on the second-hand market or from a private seller, you're perfectly free to do so. If you want to buy commercial property, then maybe the Bahamas is not the option for you. This is because this program focuses on residential real estate, so this is what you're really going for. However, you would be happy to know that you can perfectly rent out this property, especially when you're not spending any time in the Bahamas. You can actually rent it and get some profit from it. Another perk that you have is that, as I mentioned, you're only legally required to maintain this investment for the first 10 years. So you come from Canada or another high-tax country, and you want to switch to a friendly tax residence in the Caribbean. But another perk is that if, for example, you wish to repatriate those funds and any profit that you make from the sale, you're perfectly free to do so, so long as you did the process right from the start and you registered the purchase with the central bank's exchange control department. Now let's compare it to the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands only has the real estate purchase option for permanent residence, and as I mentioned, the investment is much higher, starting out at $2.4 million. But what other perks come with this? First of all local real estate is eligible, and you can acquire more than one property as long as you meet the minimum threshold requirements. Now, as well as in the Bahamas, in the Cayman Islands, you're perfectly free to rent out these properties for profit. Now, another perk that I will mention in this video about the permanent residence by investment in the Cayman Islands is that the property doesn't necessarily have to be registered under your name. You can also, for example, have joint ownership or even register it under a limited liability company for added asset protection. There is a downside, though, if you compare it with the Bahamas. If you decide to sell the property, you have up to 180 days to purchase a new one. So you pretty much always have to keep the investment in the Cayman Islands to maintain the residence, of course. Additionally, you are required to show sufficient income or sufficient resources to the Cayman Islands. This is usually done by proving that you have annual income of at least 120,000 US dollars. Now, what are some other aspects that we take into account when we are tailoring a holistic plan for a client? Well, for example, one of the things that clients often ask about is whether this residence gives them the right to work in this jurisdiction, which is not always the case. So, for example, in the Bahamas, the work permit is very limited, and you can typically only work there if you own a family office or if you are operating a business that doesn't necessarily interact with the local Bahamian economy. The upside of this, though, is that you can also bring personal assistants or even household staff within your residence permit, of course, subjected to them also getting a work permit in the Bahamas. The upside of this, though, is that the Bahamas does allow you to include personal assistants and even household staff that you can bring along with you into the country. Of course, this is subjected to them also obtaining a work permit, but given that you need to spend some time there, and if you're, for example, going to rent the property, this comes in very handy. On the other hand, the Bahamas does give you more room to work with your permanent residence permit. However, you must make sure that this activity falls within the list of approved occupations that the government issues. Now, I want to touch base on what dependents you can add to your application. So, in this aspect, the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands are quite similar, but there are some differences. In the Bahamas, you can include your spouse, your underage children, which means children under 18 years old, and your parents. If you're including your children, though, they must be financially dependent on you and live permanently with you as well. The Cayman Islands, on the other hand, is much more flexible. You can both include spouse or your civil partner, and listen to this, same-sex marriages are also recognized. When it comes to children, the general rule is also that you can include them up to when they're 18 years old. However, if they're still in school, for example, in university, you can actually include them up to the age of 24. Last but not least, let's talk citizenship. There is a way to obtain Bahamian citizenship by naturalization, and this is you must have held the permanent residence permit for at least 10 years, and you must make sure to meet the physical presence requirements. For the first 3 years of residence, this is not so relevant, so long as you stay at least the 90 days that are required for the residence permit. But then after the 3rd year, you must be physically present in the country for at least 6 months during the next 6 years. And then on the 10th year, you must actually remain physically present in the Bahamas for the entire 12 months. With the Cayman Islands, citizenship becomes a lot more interesting. And this is because the permanent residence gives you a pathway to become a British Overseas Territories citizen, which can ultimately lead you to a British citizenship. But we'll go over that into detail in another video. For now, let's go into the conclusions of how these two programs compare. First of all, you have the Bahamas, which gives you a lower investment, but you must be willing to commit the time. On the other hand, if you want maximum flexibility and to only be required to spend 1 day per year, the Cayman Islands is the option for you. Yes, the investment may be higher, but you get more flexibility on real estate ownership and a potential pathway to British citizenship. So, the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands? Which one is better? It ultimately comes down to your specific situation and what you prioritize the most. And of course, this is only a brief description of general requirements, but there's a lot more that goes into it. So, if you want to find out more about how we can help you diversify and go where you're treated best, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply and we'll be happy to assess your particular situation. Now, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media, and I'll see you on the next video.
This is Bali. is how to live like a king.